this project, right? This sort of project that Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff write about in The Coddling of American Mind. This thing about hyper-safetyism, about zero tolerance for discrimination, bigotry, bullying, all that kind of stuff. Hyper-obsessiveness with word policing. That whole project has fallen apart in my eyes, and I think a lot of people's eyes, over the last month or so, because of the way the campuses are utterly incapable of speaking with not just moral clarity, but just clarity, with consistency. You cannot, there's no definition, there's no way you can consistently argue that, this is a point I made on the Dispatch podcast yesterday, but, it was like, there are people who say you can't say master bedroom, right? Because master is a verboten word now. You can't say, I remember when when it was proposed, this was years ago, but we have to stop calling them seminars. We should call them ovulars. And you can go across, we all remember all of these crazy sort of oppressive language lists and offensive language lists. And, we can't say Dutch treat and all these kinds of things because it creates a hostile environment, and that general project, right, is out the window now, right? You can't say believe all women unless they're, except for Jewish women where there is monumental evidence that they were raped and abused. You can't say that you can't use violent language, violent imagery, martial metaphors. One of these lists I was looking at, says you can't say take a stab at a project because stabbing is triggering and insensitive and evocative of violence. But you can offer open apologies for the stabbing of Jews, right? And it's funny, I found this one list of offensive language list, things, because they're all over the place. I think it was Colorado State, and I didn't get into it in the G file, but I thought it was interesting. I had never heard before that saying hip hip hooray was offensive. And I kind of went down a rabbit hole on this. So Colorado State says that the reason why you can't say hip hip hooray is that allegedly Nazis, when they rounded up and killed Jews, would say hip hip hooray. And okay, that's interesting, right? But this is one of my problems with the language police stuff. I didn't know that, right? I went to Rodef Sholem Day School. I wrote, a book about fascism. I'm a kind of a word guy. Never heard this before. The idea that a normal person who says hip hip hooray means any offense when they say hip hip hooray is just so incredibly stupid. And the people who come in with these lists and coming up with these rules, about, sending people to sensitivity training and that perception is reality and all that, they're the ones who set these rules. They're the ones who've been imposing these rules on college campuses for years. They're the ones who have exported this nonsense into HR departments in a lot of universities. They've brought it into journalism. I mean, sometimes I think that it's the HR departments at places like the Associated Press that are making editorial decisions about what words can and can't be used. And so it kind of drives me crazy. I see all the time on TV or read about how, and it's all over the place on Twitter, people will say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. They say, you Luddites, you idiots, you retrograde, right-wing fools. That's not what we mean by from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. We mean there will be one multicultural democratic state where people will live in peace and harmony side by side, and there will be rule of law and justice for everybody, not just for the Jews. And it's a wonderful secular liberal vision and blah, 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 blah. Maybe you're not full of crap and you actually believe that. Okay, that's great. Good for you. I'm not sure that vision is workable on the ground, but it doesn't offend me. I think there's I mean, personally, I think there's a good argument for allowing Israel to remain a Jewish state. Perfectly fine if that's your definition of from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. There are two problems with it. One, you're in the minority. Well, there are three problems. One, you're in the minority. Two, the majority means something very different. Like, it is still in Hamas's charter. Hamas is saying it to this day that all of the Jews will be killed or exiled from the area, right? They want to make the entire land that they call Palestine Judenfrei. They want to purge and eliminate the Jews from the land. That's what they mean. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And this attempt to whitewash what the people who are butchering, putting babies in ovens and raping people and murdering old ladies and taking families hostage, the idea to sort of whitewash or confuse what those people mean by the phrase by insulting and gaslighting people, by saying, no, it's a perfectly peaceful, nice phrase, is grotesque. It's morally and politically grotesque. But third, and this is the relevant point to this thing about what's going on college campuses, is it shouldn't matter, right? I mean, I've been making, I've been making this argument for years about no one knows that has this definition of rule of thumb. No one is thinking about the master-slave relationship when they talk about master bedroom or master hard drives or slaved hard drives or anything like that. These are things that people who are professionally empowered to take offense at things on behalf of other people who don't give a rat's ass come up with to give themselves power, right? It is a kind of a priesthood thing where we are going to be in charge of the use of language, and we're going to create these sort of traps that if you don't use the right shibboleths, if you don't use the right phrases and code words, then that outs you as part of the out group, and then we get to call you a bigot or whatever, right? That is the game that the language police have been playing forever. I don't think it was the intent of everyone who came up with Latinx to use it that way, as a sort of like, oh, you're not hip to the in-group lingo if you don't use Latinx. I think it started as a dumb idea about degendering Spanish and being more inclusive towards women in academic literature, but it took on a life of its own as one of these sort of in-group shibboleth things. And there are people on these campuses who think you have to say Latinx when the average Latino in this country thinks it's a garbage word if they've heard of it at all. And a lot more Latinos and Hispanics take offense at Latinx than prefer it. I mean, and the polling on this, as you know, I've talked about this a million times, is clear. But the whole logic of this hypersensitivity, language policing, safe space, coddling of the snowflakes stuff says that ignorance is not an excuse, right? If an intent is not an excuse. You can't use this language if it causes anyone else to feel unsafe. If it can be interpreted as offensive, it's offensive, right? Well, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free is interpreted reasonably by a large swath of Jews and non-Jews, but the Jews are kind of relevant in this context, as a call for the extermination of Jews in Israel and an eradication of the state of Israel. And it is an interpretation that has merit, that is in wide use. This is not hip, hip, hooray. How dare you, sir?